rare and balanced view on politics in today's world. Based on facts, born of rationality, common sense, and logic, providing context on today's events. This is American Perspective with Rick Thomas.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to American Perspective. It's a sad day today. 23 years ago today was probably, I would have to say, the worst day in American history in the 21st century, for sure. And I'm just gonna say that these are one of the, a day like today is one of those days that you will remember every single thing that occurred that day, where you were when the moment when you found it out, when you discovered what was going on, so on and so forth. And it's definitely one of those things that you will, for the rest of my life anyway, I know I will never, ever forget. I want to take a minute to memorialize that particular day. And I want to make sure that, we respect them. The people that died, the almost 3,000 that died. And so I want to start off with the program with not our normal, Pledge of Allegiance, but I want to play taps for this, and then we'll get into some of the other things, and then I'll start kicking off the program a little bit more typically. So, please, if you are of mind, let's take a moment for the lost ones that fell on September 11th. And let's take a moment to remember them while we listen to taps. Okay, Nana, Nana of JJS on Rumble just posted, tell us your story of 9/11. We all have our stories of that day. Where were you when you found out? What were you doing, and how did it touch your soul? Ironically, that was exactly what I was going to do. So thank you for bringing that up. So, the morning of 9/11, you need to understand my son, which was my firstborn, had about 2 weeks to cook left. And my wife, was on what was called bed rest, essentially for the 3 weeks up to his arrival due to, a condition, I think they called it preeclampsia, if I recall correctly. But anyway, she was at home. I was getting ready to go to work. We lived south of Seattle, Washington at the time. And I was getting ready to get up and head off to my job. My job at the time was about, 6 60 miles away or so. And before I continue on this, I gotta recognize Becky from Facebook. She just reminded me there were also 29 Australians that lost their lives that day as well, in the towers. But anyway, to continue, I was waking up that day. I had just gone, and of course you got to remember, I mean, we lived on the, living on the West Coast, everything is like 3 hours behind. And, oh, that's interesting. I look like I'm skipping. Okay. So for the Rumblers, stand by for just a second. Let me see if I can fix that. Let's see if this will actually help them. Give me just a second here. We'll see if that helps. Am I back yet on Rumble? That may not be. May have to. Actually, okay. See if I can fix that. Let's see if it comes back. Come on, Rumble. Come on, Rumble. Let me see here. What's going on here? Let's try that again. Let's see if it'll pick it back up. There we go. Now it should come back for you guys for Rumble. There we go. Let's see. Yep. There we go. All right. At least I got it back. Everybody okay now? Everybody good? Yeah, it looks like it. Okay. So, all right. Sorry about that. Yep. Okay. 5 by 5. That's cool. All right. So where was I? Oh, I was just getting ready to shower and get out the door. And for whatever reason, my wife, who normally doesn't watch like morning television programs, she had turned on the television for the news. And from the time that I stepped into the shower, because we saw the first tower had gotten hit, but we hadn't seen what had happened. And I don't think anybody really did. The first initial news reports were, hey, something's happened. There's a fire. There was no major details or anything of that nature for it. And by the time I had gone into the shower and come back out, we were both watching. I was there to get the update on what was happening. I was like, did anything change? And I took a look at the screen. And as I was watching, the second plane live on television flew into the second tower. And the helicopter shot, I mean, for anybody, and this kind of irritates me a little bit, is when you have these conspiracy theories and conspiracy theorists and so on and so forth who were sitting there and talking about how there was a missile that hit, or for an example, it wasn't the plane that hit the Pentagon, it was a missile, so on and so forth. They didn't have time, I would imagine, unless this was kind of like the Truman Show, all completely scripted. They didn't have time to create this special effects and play this on video if it was live. And I I was awestruck by what happened. And the first thing that I said is I turned, I looked at my wife, and I said, "We're under attack." And unfortunately, I had to obviously take off and go to work. And then, of course, my drive time was like an hour roughly to get to work. And so by the time I walked in to the office, most of the office was actually pretty empty when I had gotten there. And it turned out that a lot of people had called in and said, "Look, we're not coming in." But I went and I talked to my boss for a few minutes. And of course, you know, the day pretty much was shot. Let's just be honest, in terms of any kind of work, because everybody was focused on the television screens. We had gone and set up a couple TVs in the break room, and the break room was pretty much filled, and so on and so forth. But for me personally, being, you know, a ex-service member, I had actually gotten out in 1994, and this was, you know, several years past my time, but the thought actually did cross my mind in terms of going back in. I actually considered re-enlisting, even though I had my first on the way. And unfortunately for my wife, you know, she pretty much had no other choice. She had to stay on the couch and watch the entire thing. And listen to all of the commentary and everything else. And the really sad part about this is one of my coworkers, whom I didn't know this at the time, but one of my coworkers, she came in the next day and she said, "We can't find my uncle." And I kind of looked at her and I'm like, what do you, I don't understand. What do you mean? Her uncle was one of the maintenance people in the North Tower. And they couldn't contact him. And apparently he was in the tower itself and was one of the ones lost. They couldn't find him. They couldn't contact him or anything else. They had no idea what was going on. And of course, keep in mind, I mean, you know, once the towers came down, you know, a lot of people were trying to figure out if they had, you know, been able to contact their folks, the people that they knew down in the downtown towers, and some of the other areas around. And, unfortunately, you know, it's, at least in his case, he was never recovered. As far as I know, they never recovered any of his body. He just disappeared. And of course, in the days afterward, you know, we saw all of the horror, the images that everybody has, you know, seen by now, for sure. And the one thing that, of course, comes out of this is that I will never forget that day because, of course, after 2 weeks, my son was born. Turns out one of his best friends was actually born today. So this is his birthday. He not only has the birthday to remember, but also has the whole thing about September 11th. Now, I kind of went around and, well, first of all, the memorial that occurred in New York City, and I'll just show you this really quick. The memorial that occurred in New York City, they went through and did, you know, the timing and everything else, moments of silence for every time that got, you know, that every time something major happened. You know, 846 started with the first tower, which would have been 546 back here. And then 903 was when the second flight hit the tower. But one of the things that I wanted to point out is here, and this is an image. For those of you that are on the audio portion of the program, I will explain slightly. But here is an image of essentially Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, Donald Trump, and what appears to be perhaps Chuck Schumer with his back to us. And even though they had gone and gotten into, the debate last night, they were at the towers, at the Tower Memorial, along with several others, and at least they got the opportunity to shake hands. So obviously, they, it wasn't anything really, really mean about it, apparently. But couple of things that came out of 9/11, which I don't think a lot of people realize. James Woods actually had let some people know about some very suspicious, it could have been Bloomberg 3 Chevy. It could have been Bloomberg. The guy that had our back to us, 3 Chevy, says, I thought that was Bloomberg. That very well could have been. But the thing about it is that a lot of people don't understand is James Woods was actually flying on a flight for whatever reason a few days prior, and he actually has talked about this several times. But he noticed some individuals, basically, like, in his mind, it was a pre-prep, like a dry run. And he, of course, reported it, but, as you could see, nothing happened because of it. But that would be kind of creepy to essentially see what is potentially could have been a dry run for the actual day, for the hijacking of the planes with the box cutters and so on and so forth. So it was profound. And the thing that I saw afterward that was so amazing, which seeing today, 2024, and knowing what the world was like in the aftermath of 2001, I honestly can't believe that it's been 23 years and we are at the crux of what is potentially going to be the deciding factor for the end of the Republic in just a few months, 54 days away. I remember those days. Everybody as Americans, even the world, it wasn't just America, it was the entire world. Okay? The entire world melded together, meshed together. It didn't matter who you were, where you were from. Everyone was right here in their hearts. Everyone was with New York City in their hearts. Everyone flew a flag. Not one single person during that time. And believe me, for the days afterward, where we lived, we were close to SeaTac Airport. And then in the days afterward, after all of the planes had been grounded, and it took a couple of days for things to start back up, the sky was so quiet. It was like nothing was moving on the earth. It was as though time had sort of stood still for those days. And everybody just the entire world just sort of felt like it had a heart-wrenching moment, and there was prayers for people. You could see people waving at firefighters and police officers, and the overwhelming and outpouring love and support for those people who had risked their lives every day to help others. And I saw so many flags. I saw people proud of America. There was almost like no anger from anyone. You would see people get cut off in the parking lot, and today, they would be like screaming out the window and flipping each other off and possibly getting into a road rage incident. But those 48 hours at a minimum after this had happened, it was as though all of the rage, all of the hate, all of the discontent, all of it was gone. That it got taken away by this one singular event. As 3 Chevy pointed, blood banks were overwhelmed with donors. People were they were helping out with like the cadaver dogs. They were sending dog food. They were sending toys. There was just so much occurring during those last, even like a week later, it was still that way. I took a 8x5 flag and I hung it on my house, which was across the street actually from a fire department. So I got a chance to look at those guys every single day. It was as though, in my mind, it was as though the whole world had just said, you know what? Hate stops today. Discord stops today. We were all together after that event. Didn't matter whether you were black, white, Indian, Asian. Didn't make any difference whatsoever. Everybody just sort of stopped and let it go. And here we are 23 years later. All of that forgotten. All of that has passed. We are now literally fighting to save our public. It is amazing what happens, what 20 years can do. Anyway, I also wanted to do a video here really quick. This video comes from Michael Barbagallo. And this is the footage. Most of you probably have seen it, but this is the footage that was seen where the second flight 175, hit the second tower, the South Tower, and some of the confusion and everything that was happening down on the ground. The clip itself is about 1:27, so 1:30 long, and I'd like to play the entire thing just so you can remember and see, or hopefully see and recall what it was like back then. I got to switch screens here so you get the whole thing, and I'm going to go ahead and mute my webcam and just take a minute to remember and recall the horror of that day.
Oh my God!
So, yeah, just imagine being underneath when that happened. Yeah, it's, it's pretty heavy. Especially when you go and you take a look at some of those other videos and stuff. And believe me, I've listened and seen and watched a lot of the videos since then. There was one in particular where they were showing some of the firefighters that had gone into the building. And in the background, you can hear the sounds of the bodies hitting the pavement, the cement outside. It's very sobering. Very, very sad day. So take a moment to reflect. Take a moment to, remember in your own way about it. And just remember that that tragic events do happen. I do believe that they do for a reason, and I think the reason for that, honestly, I think at least one of the reasons for this thing to happen was the fact that it was a wake-up call for all of us to remember that life is fragile, and that we, as a people, can actually come together. As a people, and forget all of our boring aspects. All right, let me step out of the way so you guys can see the 9/11 background. There's the 9/11 background for tonight. All right. May all of those souls and the people impacted, just like, Corey Compatore's people, or, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, anyway. All right. Let's go ahead and move on. So, tonight, of course, is... Oh, wait a minute. It might help if I actually get back to my right. Tonight, of course, is...
Down to business.
That's the nectar of the gods, baby.
Whiskey Wednesday. And because it is Whiskey Wednesday, I'm supposed to be drinking. But unfortunately, I had a headache earlier, and I do not mix alcohol and medicine. So tonight, I'm just going to be sipping on some iced tea. So some green iced tea. So there we go. All right. And of course, because tonight is, okay, Bonnie, I don't see that, happening on my end. So I apologize for that. Maybe give it a, refresh on your own side. But anyway, so, where was I? Oh, yes. So tonight is, of course, just talking about, I'm stoneless tonight. I'm stoneless tonight, according to 3 Chevy. So, all right. And tonight, of course, is about True Grit Roots Network. They're our sponsor. TGRN, True Grit Roots Network, with TGRN Blues, our 24/7, 365 blues channel. Let me tell you a little bit about Mighty Mouth Blues, which is one of our fantastic shows put on by my own on-air personality buddy, Jonathan Oogie Richards. Hosted and produced by Oogie and his daughter, Amber Burr-Hill. Mighty Mouth Blues brings the hottest mix of blues, new blues, and old school hits, along with interviews from with artists and blues news makers, shaping today's blues from all parts of the world. Mighty Mouth Blues airs Tuesday, 8 p.m. Central. That's 8 p.m. Central in the U.S. and has an encore presentation on Saturday at 8 p.m. Central time as well. So go and check us out at Mighty Mouth. Go and check out Mighty Mouth Blues and all of our other station shows and wonderful on-air personalities by heading off to tgrn.net. And tgrn.net, you can go and listen right through your browser. You can also download our app, or if you already have any one of the Live 365, iHeart Radio, or Odyssey, AUDACY applications on your phone, you can find us in their catalog of digital radio stations. Go and check us out right here at tgrn.net. That's True Grit Roots Network with TGRN Blues based out of Austin, Texas. That promo, I kind of fumbled a bit there. A little bit here and there. Good thing that wasn't for any money. All right. So let's talk about the debate. Now, obviously, we had a debate show last night. I went ahead and streamed the entire thing, or I should say simulcast the entire thing from NBC's simulcast of the ABC casting of the network. And one of the things that struck me, not that it was anything unexpected. I mean, let's be honest, ABC News, fake news, probably one of the most fake news of all the fake newses. And it ended up being basically a 3-on-1 debate. Now, I told you the night before, Monday, that on Monday's show, that ABC News, that David Muir guy, or Muir, okay, that David Muir guy and his partner had 100%, not just some, not just like 55, 56, no, 100% positive coverage of Kamala Harris. And 83% or 85%, can't really remember, but somewhere, of negative coverage of Trump. Now, this set up, and why anybody, first of all, I'm kind of surprised that Trump even went in, although that kind of shows you the type of character that he is, that he's not afraid of going in, and he's not afraid of going into, unfriendly territory, let's say. Unlike her, she won't even go into a Fox debate. But what ended up happening was it started off, probably for the first 15, 20 minutes, it seemed amicable. And they actually, asked decent questions. They did challenge, I think, within the first 5 minutes, they kind of challenged a little bit. This is like a really big stretch here for calling the term challenge. Kamala Harris on her first question. But what ended up happening is the entire thing broke down to where it was essentially, have you ever seen that thing in the circus where you have the lion tamer and he's got he's got the chair in one hand, the whip in the other, and he's got like 3 tigers or lions surrounding him, and he's like constantly whipping the air and trying to get the big cats off of him. That's kind of what it looked like. And so, unfortunately, that fed into Trump's, need to defend himself. And so overall, the debate itself, I personally don't think that it really came off that great for Trump. But that being said, that also doesn't mean that Trump lost. I think it was net neutral for Trump. Trump didn't gain anything. Trump didn't lose anything. When it comes to Kamala Harris, though, a couple of key things did show up. One is that she did actually get under Trump's skin with the help of the moderators. And so if you are in the 35% or so of the electorate who is just extremely sycophantic for Kamala Harris, she won. But if you're not in that camp and you're in the middle, you're in that 30% that's in the middle, then you're kind of thinking, yeah, she didn't really impress anybody. And honestly, that is exactly what some of the exit polling data and some of the focus groups that came out after it are starting to show, was that the independent voters, the ones that weren't already decided, which this is nothing unusual, but once everything was kind of already, if you weren't really all that decided, you didn't really get a lot of information. Trump was Trump. Trump didn't change. You've seen Trump since 2016. Kamala Harris talked a lot of pie in the sky ideals, spent a lot of time goading Trump and trying to get him to get angry and pissed off, which, you know, she was kind of successful at with the fact that she had the two moderators helping her out. But she didn't offer up any policy. She didn't offer up anything new. She didn't demonstrate how she could be a better president than Trump. She even lied multiple times without getting fact-checked. While Trump got fact-checked 4 times actively. And so what ended up happening was exactly what most people would say was expected, which was that Trump went into the lion's den and he came out not smelling like a rose, but also not smelling like manure either. And so realistically, some of this is going to have to bear out throughout the next, week or so. But I honestly, my prediction is I don't think it really changed the mood of the country. I don't think it really changed the electorate that much. And in fact, probably in about a week, what everybody's going to remember and what everybody's still going to be talking about, if they're any interested in it, is how bad the moderation was. And that's pretty much where we're probably going to end up falling in. But I wanted to take a couple of minutes and talk about it. Now, as far as like the ABC moderators, just for purposes of this and any other conversation, you need to understand that the moderators were blasted on social media about how biased they actually were. But I want to walk through a few things because there were some things that definitely popped up and showed up. And in fact, believe it or not, there is some conversation about a potential second debate. So apparently the Kamala Harris campaign reached out with an idea that she was going to want to be in another debate. And Trump himself, my understanding is that they have agreed to be in talks with some of that. So there you go. And so, yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm kind of hoping that there is a second debate now that we've had this first one. I'm kind of hoping that there is a second one. But what's interesting, though, is that if you really feel that you won that debate, why would you be off or asking for a second one? If you really and truly felt that you won that debate, why would you be asking for a second one? Because again, if the meter doesn't change much and there's no real bump, which a lot of people are basically saying that, yeah, this is really mediocre. you got to kind of wonder what would be the purpose of asking for a second debate. Honestly, though, as some people have noticed and noted, with few exceptions, debates haven't been that much of a factor on elections in the past. Now, keep in mind, I mentioned last night during the program, there was the Nixon v. JFK debate where Nixon looked, was profusely sweating on camera. And so that was one of those debates that, him sweating as much as he did generally tended to twist the electorate toward JFK, and has been pointed out as potentially, a factor in Nixon's loss. But also, too, you had the whole Gerald Ford versus Jimmy Carter. And Gerald Ford was having some troubles explaining his positions and where he would have been the pullout candidate or the advantage candidate, and also trying to step out from behind Nixon's shadow. And that wasn't really too effective. But also, too, was that the idea of something like a one-liner that came out from, say, the Reagan-Mondale debate, that didn't necessarily occur either. Although there were some good moments, don't get me wrong, but I don't think it was, again, I don't think it was really all that positive, and I don't think it was negative. It just sort of is. Now, in particular, a couple things did come out, one of them being for certain about abortion. And I kind of hate to cover this, but this is one of those things where you sort of have to, they fact checked and they said that there was no states, not one state, that was into killing babies after they were born. Now, keep in mind, that actually is not entirely true. And here's the thing, is that Minnesota, so there's 9 states, including, and DC isn't a state, but there's 9 states plus DC that literally have 0 what they call gestational limits on when an abortion can be performed. Of those, you're talking about Alaska, Oregon, Minnesota, and a few others. But the key one, though, is Minnesota. Minnesota doesn't have a limit on when an abortion can be performed. And for a time, at least up until the point that Tim Walz got the law changed, they were actually keeping track. And there were some abortion attempts in Minnesota that resulted in a live birth. 8, to be exact, over the course of a period of time. And the 8 were basically left essentially to die. That a couple were given comfort methodologies, but they all died. And so this idea by the left that this is not happening anywhere, okay, is completely wrong. Tim Walz's home state in Minnesota took away the requirement, and that's the other piece out of this. They took away the requirement that if a baby was born alive from a botched abortion, that they would have to be given life-saving I want to say methods, but that's not it. But they have to be giving life-saving treatment to try and save the baby if it is the result of a botched abortion. He got the legislature to take that out. And so they very well know, the left very much knows that this is occurring. They just don't want you to know about it. They don't want you to be told about it. And by the way, this is all verifiable on the Minnesota's website, Minnesota Health's website. So it does happen. It does happen. Now, the kind of interesting after effects of the debate as well. I don't know why this is not coming up. There we go. The kind of interesting after effects, of course, is, again, like I was saying, the focus groups. They had a couple focus groups that they talked to that were saying that Kamala didn't really do anything for us. She didn't really say anything. She didn't really move the meter in any way. You know, and again, Trump is Trump. But one of the biggest things that came out of the final polls, the exit polls, as we can kind of say and mention, is the fact that the economy is like the top kitchen table issue for everybody. Now, this is not exactly news to those of us who are on the right, who essentially have been talking about these kinds of things for quite some time. But I believe that even though the debate centered a lot on immigration, centered some on abortion, which one reviewer who was talking about the debate was saying that at that point, and I've got to go back and watch it again, probably on my own program, but I've got to go back and watch it again. But they basically made the observation that it appeared that once Trump talked about the abortion issue and sort of dismissed it out of hand, got it taken care of out of hand, is when the moderators became essentially rabid dogs and started attacking him. But the one thing that kept coming out on these polls, these exit polls, these exit questions, had to deal with the economy. And here, this in the Daily Wire, CNN poll. After debate, even more voters trust Trump on the economy. Now, this was a CNN poll that was taken, and CNN's Jake Tapper actually introduced the polls. But the thing about it is that it shows something very interesting. And again, keep in mind that it's not, again, not much shifted realistically. Not much shifted. So here, let's take a listen to this. Oh, here we go. Oh, wait a minute. I thought it was a video. It's actually an image. My bad. So during the conversation that they were having, they were talking about who would better handle the economy. And it was based out of, instant polls. Granted, it's a small poll size, so on and so forth, but it was an instant poll. And before the debate, 37% trusted Kamala Harris, 53% trusted Donald Trump. After the debate, it was 35% for Kamala Harris and 55% for Donald Trump. So we're talking about a 2% switch here in the poll. Now, keep in mind, we don't know anything in terms of the amount of people that they talked to or anything else, but it was these kinds of shifts, these slight shifts that you were seeing is what came out of a multitude of polling and focus group data that was coming out. So even though there may not be a momentous shift, we could over time potentially see, and the reason why I say over time is because it's going to be a little while before this, give it about a week for any of this kind of feelings and information and that kind of stuff to filter into the polling data. But one of the things that seems to be a common exit focus group point is that the economy is important. Kamala Harris didn't tell us anything about her plan to get us out of this economic ruin that we're actually in, and that Donald Trump has more of a trust in terms of handling the economy. And this has been reflected on a couple of different focus groups that came out. And so things like this can give you a bit of a, shall we say, at least make you feel a little bit better. Because even though Trump's performance itself, and keep in mind, okay, keep very much in mind, I personally believe that debating and speaking is not Trump's strong suit. Okay. It's just not. He is not a stellar debater. He is not a stellar speaker. But what I think is going to be, obviously going to be the difference here is which one of these two candidates can actually get their message across as to who is going to make the change, because it's obvious that the electorate, and by the electorate, I mean the people, they all want change. And if Harris cannot get out from underneath the shadow of Joe Biden and being a part of the Joe Biden campaign, it's going to cause her a bit of heartache moving forward. And she, so far, I don't think has done a very good job at that message. And yes, all of my rumblers, who a lot of them follow Dan Bongino, this one in particular, I know, this is Bonnie. Bonnie says, Rick, are you saying that Trump is not a master debater? And yes, that is true. He is not a master debater. You got to put a pause in between. You got to put a pause in between in order, because otherwise, it kind of runs together. Whew, that's bad. But anyway, so it's going to be interesting moving forward to kind of see what this boils out. But in my personal opinion, I don't think it's really going to shift the polls very much in one way or the other to again, you're looking at, 35%. If you talk about 100% of the people, you got 35% of the people are, 35% of the people are in the Trump camp. 35% of the people are in the Kamala Harris camp. Everybody's kind of fighting over that middle. We know that 100%, we never get 100% voting. So we're talking about maybe 10 to 15% of the actual voters are going to be in the middle. And so you're fighting over a very small pile of people. And I don't think this debate really did anything for either one. Okay, so here in the New York Post, as I was talking about this, here in the New York Post, Harris's campaign calls for a second debate less than an hour after Trump's performance is panned by critics. Now, keep in mind, in my particular point of view, I don't think either one really does it. I don't think either one really did. They did what they wanted to do, or at least Kamala Harris did what she wanted to do, but I don't think it really gained her anything. Because, too, there's the other thing as well. Dr. Phil, I was watching a video before I came on. Dr. Phil had a couple of body language experts on talking about the debate and the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris in the beginning, which you could tell if you listen to the audio portion of it, you can tell her mouth is very dry. She was very stressed. I don't think she was very comfortable at first. She was, when somebody is really stressed and speaking in front of a bunch of people and their mouth is really dry, they get dry mouth. and you'll hear them and they'll kind of smack when they have, unlike mine, which is watering right now, but they'll smack a lot when they are pausing and, making their, making sounds. And you could definitely hear that in Kamala Harris in the beginning. And then she eventually got more comfortable as she started to realize that her plan of getting under Trump's skin was actually working. And then, of course, the moderators jumped in and she knew that she was behind this little shield of protection. And so she got bolder and bolder as she went along, along the path. But here in this New York Post piece, the campaign communications director, Brian Fallon, wrote on X, "That was fun. Let's do it again in October." They also, the Harris campaign also put out a press blast that also called for an October debate. Campaign chair Jen O'Malley Dillon of the Harris-Walz campaign said, Vice President Harris is ready for a second debate is Donald Trump. And here's the thing is that I honestly don't know for sure if he is going to be willing to do it, but I guarantee you that because of the fact that they put this out so quickly, if he decides to say, you know what, I'm not going to do it, even if she gets to a point where she says, hey, let's do it again on, say, ABC or NBC or CBS, I think what's going to end up happening is if the debate happens, it's going to have to be on some sort of a semi-neutral platform. I mean, let's just be honest here. Trump is not going to go back into a situation like that, I don't think. And a lot of people say that he shouldn't have gone in the first place because come to find out, and I meant to mention this earlier, but come to find out, the chief person, the one in charge of ABC, actually is good friends with Kamala Harris and is actually good friends with Doug Emhoff and actually set the two of them up originally. And so what ended up happening is you had the boss who was Kamala Harris's buddy, and this is part of the reason why I actually believe, based on her responses and how quickly she was able to respond in her non-responses, she pretty much knew, at a very minimum, the topics that they were going to go after. I can't imagine that that person at ABC has the ethics to give her any kind of help whatsoever. I just don't. And the two people that they picked for the moderators were on purpose too. I mean, let's just face it. ABC, this entire debate wasn't even a debate. It was more of a let's roast Trump. That's what it was. But anyway, so we'll have to see if they decide to do another debate. But I'm going to tell you right now, Donald Trump should not go into any unfriendly territory. In fact, to make it even remotely somewhat fair, he should be able to pick a different news organization, say, for an example, Newsmax, okay, that potentially Newsmax would be a good media moderating company. I'll be honest with you. And I'm going to throw this out here. I don't know if if the Trump campaign would even be interested. But I say this, ditch the news media outlets. Ditch them completely. They can be there. They can set up their cameras or whatever. They can take the feed from whatever else. Okay. But I say, pick a university, pick if you want to, pick a place where, a neutral ground. The conference center was actually perfect, but grab somebody to moderate it that is outside of the news media. Find yourself some independent news folks, if you want news folks, or even better yet, I offer myself up as moderator. I offer myself up as the moderator. I will come and moderate. I will come and moderate. I will be the one to moderate the setup. And we'll film the entire thing. Nothing special, nothing fancy. But I can guarantee you this much. I will be fair to both sides. I will be fair to both sides. The questions will be fair, and you will answer the questions. I'm not going to sit here and allow you to not answer the question. We can work out the details on the rest of it, but I am offering myself up as moderator. If you want to have a secondary moderator there, that's fine too. We can probably find somebody. But at the very least, what should happen is you should have a moderator that is the choice of the Trump campaign and a moderator that is the choice of the Harris campaign, and very, very strict rules in between them. But I'm offering myself up because I'm not going to let stuff like the fine people hoax pass by, like the bloodbath hoax pass by. I'm not going to let any lies, innuendo, misconstruing facts and evidence. And yes, Becky points out, no one gets the questions early. Yeah, no one gets the questions early. I promise to be fair and balanced. You will both answer the same question. You will be able to answer the exact same question, however you want to do it. And you can then do rebuttals and we can work out all of the details. But I'm offering myself up as the moderator. You can't get any more outside of the mainstream news media than right here. And yes, that's right. The suckers and losers lie. In fact, yeah. Oh, buddy. I'm too liberal, apparently, according to Buddy. But anyway, I highly doubt that the Trump campaign or even the Kamala Harris campaign would even see this video, but there we go. There we go. I offer myself up as being the moderator for your next debate. You guys want to debate? That's fine. Pick a neutral ground. In fact, even better yet, let's just find like someplace as neutral as possible to both sides and we'll go from there. So, but I offer myself up as that. I don't have a problem being on camera, obviously. So I don't care. But anyway, all right. Enough about the debate. I think pretty much everybody is debated out at this point. All right. So a little bit of an update. A little bit of an update for the people who had pending obstruction charges. You recall that the Supreme Court said basically that the obstruction charges did not apply to like physical meetings and things like that. That there actually had to be some actual act that would cause the destruction of documents under that law that they tried to use. And one of the things that, of course, happened was there was potential of over 300 cases that were going to get overturned or dismissed based on that one ruling. And of course, that also included the one against Trump, because Trump was charged with obstruction as well. We now know that Jack Smith has refiled the charges and has basically said, yeah, I'm not going to, you still have obstruction charges against you. But some good news for some of the January 6th defendants. Right here in the Daily Caller, the Biden DOJ dropped nearly half of pending obstruction charges for January 6th defendants after the Supreme Court ruling. So the Biden DOJ has dropped nearly half of the pending obstruction charges since the Supreme Court issued the major ruling in June, according to recent data. So the Supreme Court ruled that the DOJ had interpreted too broadly the statute that carries up to 20 years in prison for anyone who corruptly obstructs, influences, or impedes any official proceeding. Now, since Fisher v. U.S., in that ruling, around 60 of the 126 defendants had pending obstruction charges completely dropped. Data from the Department of Justice now shows. The DOJ is continuing to pursue charges for 13 defendants with pending charges and still is assessing its course of action for the rest that are remaining. So overall, of the 133 defendants whose cases had already been adjudicated when the ruling was released, and that's right here, the DOJ does not oppose dismissal or vacating the charge in approximately 40 of those cases, although it is still assessing the remaining cases according to the data. There are 0 cases where a defendant was charged with only violating 18 U.S.C. 1512, which is the statute that they're talking about. So in other words, even if the government forgoes this charge, every charged defendant will continue to face exposure to other criminal charges, they say. So the Supreme Court, of course, in the ruling established that the defendant impaired the availability or integrity for use in a official proceeding of records, documents, or objects, which again, that's part of what the whole thing boils down to. This was a Sarbanes-Oxley thing that came out of the Enron situation. And what ended up happening is it has to deal, the Supreme Court basically said, well, this happens to deal with white collar crime, not like physical obstruction and so on and so forth. And that they went ahead and made it too large of or too broad of a connection. And as I said, the ones that were already adjudicated, which are the 133, they don't oppose it being dismissed, the charges being dismissed or vacated in approximately 40 of those 133 cases. So there's still some more work to be done. Obviously, they're still going to be digging through this thing. Obviously, this isn't something that happens overnight. But definitely it is something that is occurring, and it's slowly working its way through. So good news there. Good news for that. Now, as far as January 6th is concerned, once again, it came up, obviously, due to the debate. And so the left, especially on the social medias, were talking about January 6th and how he said XYZ, and they totally cut out the entire part where he said peacefully and patriotically, just like he mentioned during the debate. So obviously, they are not going to let go of the whole January 6th narrative. But as I keep pointing out, there are things such as the Insurrection Act and the Posse Comitatus Act that prevent the deployment of any military forces against civilians here in the United States without having the local civilian authorities, which in this case would have been Nancy Pelosi, Muriel Bowser, and McConnell, I think, because McConnell was in charge of the Senate at the time. And it would have taken them calling and asking for the help, which they did not do. In fact, several times it was denied. And I've talked about that with the Capitol Police Sund and saying that he couldn't get anything pulled and that kind of stuff. All right. So, well, since they were talking about the economy at the debate, let's go ahead and talk about the economy and the inflation right now. Now, everybody is waiting for the Fed. The Fed meets again on September 18th. So we're talking about just a week away. And they are expected to make an interest rate cut. However, right now, they are waiting for two key inflation reports that are supposed to come out this week that will help decide on whether or not the Fed does a 1/4 point or potentially a 1/2 point on the interest rate. So it's pretty much a foregone conclusion right now that everybody is expecting that there will be a rate cut. They're just not exactly sure how much. So this, in the CNBC, they have two key inflation reports this week that's going to help them decide. The first one is Friday's jobs report that really didn't provide any kind of clarity. I mean, we know that the jobs report didn't come in as like they wanted it. It showed a cooling, employment look and so on and so forth. So now what the focus is for the Fed is that they're no longer looking at necessarily taming inflation. They want to try and cut back the interest rates in order to help push the unemployment and the labor market is what they're calling. So the Federal Reserve gets its last look this week at inflation readings before deciding on how much of a cut is going to occur. And here you can see on Wednesday, which is today, the Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics will release its Consumer Price Index report, which, by the way, Consumer Price Index actually went up by 0.2%, I believe. And then tomorrow, it will issue, the Bureau of Labor and Statistics will issue its Producer Price Index report for August. And these are the two reports that they are looking at for what's going on with it. Now, again, everybody is expecting rate cuts. They just don't know by how much. And the CPI and the PPI readings are supposed to help kind of clear things up. Now, my guess is that if the CPI, which we already know has gone up by 0.2%, if the CPI goes up and the PPI goes up as well, then you're probably looking at a 1/4%. If the CPI goes up, but the PPI either stays the same or goes down, anybody's guess as to what's going on. But I would hazard a guess that we are probably looking at a potential 1/4 point rate cut in the interest rates, not the inflation rate, but the interest rates. And the reason why they're even considering this is because as of right now, the inflation rate year over year is hovering just under 3%. And keep in mind that just because the interest rate is below 3% doesn't mean that we're actually dropping in interest rate. We are still going up, and we still have not totally recovered. Wages haven't recovered from the 9.1% that we hit 18 months after Joe Biden took office, after the signing of the disastrous Inflation Inducing Act. I mean, the Inflation Reduction Act. So this is just let's just call it a softening in the particular markets. And so there is a potential possible rebound outcome from this, that if we lower interest rates too early, that could cause a bump again in the inflation rate. And so we're going to have to see where this comes from in terms of what they are dealing with. Now, Citigroup economist Veronica Clark said in a note in this piece that inflation data has taken a backseat to labor market data in terms of influence on Fed policy. But with markets, and likely Fed officials themselves, are split on the appropriate size of the first rate cut on September 18th, August CPI data could remain an important factor in the upcoming decision. The Dow Jones consensus forecast is for a 0.2% increase in the CPI, which is what it did, both for all items measure as well as the core that excludes volatile food and energy prices or items. On an annual basis, that is expected to translate into a respective inflation rates of 2.6 and 3.2. The PPI is also projected to increase 0.2 on both headline and core. And the Fed officials generally put more emphasis on core as a better indicator of longer run trends. Now you can see here in this chart the consumer price index change over time, and you can see that big hit at the 9% line in the chart. I'm trying to get it above my head here so you guys can see it. So we're currently running at less food and energy at about 3.2, and all items are running at about 2.9 right now. And that goes from January of 2021 to July of 2024. So CPI obviously hasn't quite made it to the 2% long run target, which again, keep in mind that that we are essentially looking at the potential of a rate cut, but it's, the impact, we're kind of in dangerous territory here, because recovery from the pandemic has done a few things to the market that the usual indicators are not necessarily giving us the right kinds of numbers. And so there's a lot of unease in the marketplace with all of this. So anyway, so there we go. So that's coming probably by the end of the week. And of course, like I said, September 18th, don't be surprised if you don't or see or don't see something going on there. Now, what ended up happening today in the House, Speaker Johnson pulled the vote on the continuing resolution that included the SAVE Act. Okay. He pulled it because of the fact that they were not assured of getting a passing vote. And so what he did, as sort of a stopgap measure, I guess, the best way to put it, is he pulled it off the floor. He pulled the vote off the floor. The bill is still existing, still there, but they want to take a week. He rescheduled the vote for about a week so that he can maybe just wrangle some more GOP support. And so the problem is the GOP support for it. We already know the Democrats are not going to go for it as long as it has the SAVE Act as a rider in this case. Now, me personally, as much as I would love to see the SAVE Act go into play, I honestly don't think it's going to make much of an effect, especially on this particular election cycle. But that being said, there is a possibility, and more than likely what's going to happen is the SAVE Act is going to get pulled off of the CCR. They're going to, get the CCR passed. So, of course, the government can stay open, and then they might pick it up again if Donald Trump wins in November. And also they regain the Senate as a possibility for it. So pretty much at this point, it's kind of touch and go, but I mean, honestly, I'm just being completely real. I honestly don't think that, we're going to be dealing with having the SAVE Act in as a part of this. I think it's a shenanigans. It was maybe possibly a point to just take a look at as far as that goes, to try and win some political points, maybe right before, I don't know, the debate or whatever. I have no idea. It just doesn't. I personally, I've always been on the side of single issue bills, no matter what. Everything has to be single issue. If there's any kind of riders, extra pork added in, special considerations, any of those kinds of things, no. Whatever the bill has to be, it can only be a single issue that is dealt with. And to me, that seems to be the most efficient way, maybe not the most efficient necessarily, but the most honest way to run government, is that this bill changes X, and that's all it is. Not X as in Twitter, but X as in this bill changes a specific item, and anything else that's added to it, because we can't fall into the Nancy Pelosi, you got to read the bill to figure out what's in it before you can find out what's in it. I mean, that to me is like, it's just incredibly stupid. But that being the case, Speaker Johnson has decided that he's going to hold off the vote. Doesn't mean that it's completely dead, but it will be held off until next week. All right. Well, a little short tonight. I do not have a pet. I told you guys about this on Monday. I don't have a pet for tonight. I wish I did. But if you guys want to see that Pet of the Week segment come back, you got to get me some pets. You got to get me something to work with. So tonight, obviously, we're going to end a little early. Do me a favor, if you haven't done so already, head on over to rumble.com and get yourself an account. It is free to sign up. It is free to watch. Granted, you'll have some ads, but it's free to watch. Although they are running a special to buy premium for that. That being said, please, once you get your account, head on over to the American Perspective channel, hit that follow button, and you'll be guaranteed to be notified every time I go live. Also, too, before you take off, make sure you hit all those likes and thumbs up buttons. Those are all factors. Every single channel does this. All factors as to whether or not these videos get exposure. I would love to see my viewership grow. We will see you tomorrow, 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time, right here on American Perspective. Have a great rest of your evening, and good night, everybody.
The previous broadcast was produced and is owned by Active Eye Media LLC. All rights reserved.